Haptics Club podcast. I'm Ashley from Titan Haptics, and I'm joined by the Haptics crew, Brian from Sense Club, Eric from Razor, and Manu from Unity. The Haptics Club is a team of people that have a passion for haptics. Our goal is to raise awareness of the amazing tech and people happening in haptics and to foster interesting discussions around the space. We have a blog, of course, the hapticsclub.com/blog, which is relatively new. You should check it out. We've got some amazing hapticians who are sharing their insights in the area of expertise. And of course, we have a store where you can get some swag. So the hapticsclub.com/shop, get a cup, get a tank top if it's summer, get a sweatshirt if you're cold. And of course, today joining us is Peter, Vice President of SynTouch. At SynTouch, Peter develops state-of-the-art machine sensing technology, working with leaders in various industries, including consumer electronics, automotive, textiles, and consumer goods to provide novel applications for machine touch. So freaking cool. You've got to check out the videos. But we're going to talk with them today. There's much to learn, much to say, many questions to ask. And we'll start with a brief intro. We'll dive into area of expertise, and then we'll talk about the future of haptics. And of course, my favorite section, which is on challenges and just opportunities in the haptics industry. Be sure to check out the hapticsclub.com and sign up for our newsletter if you don't want to miss out our next episode in 2 weeks, which is our season finale. And last but not least, we wouldn't be here without the support of our sponsor, the Haptics Industry Forum, a haptics association that was created to streamline haptic standards and adoption and foster collaboration in the space, which is really important in the haptics industry. But enough of me talking, enough of this intro. Welcome, Brian. Welcome to the Haptics Club. So happy to have you here. Let's kick things off. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and a bit of background on your role at SynTouch?
Sure. Well, thank you very much for the kind words, and thanks for hosting me. I'm definitely very excited to be here and contribute to making our small little haptics club a lot bigger by spreading the word. Right? It is definitely a tight-knit community. So some of you may know me, and some of you may be sick of me, but for everyone else, my name is Peter. I have a schooling background in electrical engineering, and as life happens to all of us, I didn't plan to end up in haptics or anything really related. I was chasing a career in telecommunications and data science, and somewhere along the way took a job at a small robotics company in Boston, and 5 or 6 years later, somehow I was a roboticist, and one robotics company after the next led me to kind of a coastal migration from the East Coast to the West Coast, joining SynTouch the better part of 8 years ago. And really coming on board to help commercialize the technology that we have today, which we'll talk about in a bit, but really joining a very young green company that was looking to mature into I would call a small company, right? But not necessarily a startup anymore, and really kind of operating, behaving outside of that field. So long story short, you make a plan to go somewhere, and then you end up in a totally different industry, a totally different field, doing something completely different. But I wouldn't have it any other way. You sort of the field of both research robotics and haptics is a very small one, but it's been a ton of fun. You get a ton of exposure to a lot of different things. And as you mentioned before, one of the things that keeps it interesting for us is that we are constantly interfacing with all sorts of different type of clients from every different industry. And so that keeps it engaging, but certainly prevents it from getting boring or stale.
Oh, I love that so much. That's a great story. Definitely resonates with me, where it's like, there's opportunity, you take it and you realize, oh my God, this is just like this unfolding pathway, this yellow Wizard of Oz pathway. You just keep going on, and it seems magical. Very cool, Peter. Let's dive a little bit into your technology, because people may have experienced like the output of what you're working on, but maybe they've never seen what like the kind of like magic behind the scenes, keeping it on that the Wizard of Oz. Yeah, tell us a little about like what your tech is and the types of things that you work on.
Yeah. So to go into give you a peek behind the curtain, so to speak, right? If we think about the sense of touch, and we think about how other senses have been commercialized, I'd say the biggest or the easiest way to draw an analogy to what we do at SynTouch, if we think about vision, we think about how cameras over the years have gotten better and better and better, and they're able to capture more and more high fidelity information. And then you've got the other side where you take that digital information that the camera captured and digitized, and then you play it back on something like a television or a phone or some sort of streaming device where you get to view it. So you have sort of a capture device on one side and then a playback device on the other, and then with your digital medium in the middle. As far as touch is concerned, we're looking to do the exact same thing. A lot of people are very familiar with what I would call the televisions. So your phones, your laptops, your buttons that vibrate, your different tactors, your different haptic devices. But there is a camera on this side, right? And that's what we make at SynTouch. We make sort of the camera for touch, if you want to think of it that way, a way of transforming the physical world into a digital representation, a numerical representation for touch. And a lot of the applications at the moment can exist simply in the digital space. So being able to transform a human sense of touch, what something feels like, whether that be a piece of paper, glass, plastic, wood, the shampoo you used this morning, into a digital number, has opened up a large world of possibilities with objective comparisons, product design, quality control. And that's the majority of the applications we engage in today. But certainly we know that the folks building and looking to build the amazing televisions of the future are going to need an input signal. And that is sort of the driving factor behind the continued research and sort of continued engagement that we have within the haptics community, is to be able to build and leverage the digital stream that we're able to create.
That's awesome. Such a unique area of haptics that I think a lot of people probably still are just learning about. I'd love for people that maybe haven't seen a video, maybe don't know, and you don't have to go deep into tech, obviously, but just to give a picture of like your physical hardware is a serious setup, and it's super cool. Like maybe give us just a surface level of what it's kind of doing, so that people can understand what this area of haptics is kind of all about.
Yeah. SynTouch started the better part of a decade and a half ago by creating sort of this sensor technology, which was the robotic equivalent of the human finger. And so we're able to capture all the same types of signals and operate in the same types of ways with the world around us. And leveraging that sensor and incorporating it into a larger piece of tribology equipment or measurement equipment. And for those unfamiliar, think of sort of something like a microscope, a digital microscope, but for touch. The hardware itself is fairly large, about the size of an old desktop computer tower, and it can be operated by a technician. It's pretty straightforward to operate, but it's this very large black moving device with a green finger on it, so it can be a little ominous looking, but I promise it's pretty harmless. And the idea behind it is really, if we take it back to a high school physics problem, the way in which we interact with the world as people can be thought of as a two-body collision, us and whatever it is that we're touching. And the better that we can replicate that in the measurement world, to replicate that interaction between the probe and the material under test, the more in line or the more correlation we can draw between the data that we extract from our system and what humans actually experience when they touch or interface with the world around them. And so that's the fundamental sort of lightning rod to our cause, if you will, is that we're taking a biomimetic approach to capturing physical data in the real world. Lots of other measurement techniques may use things like steel balls or bending stiffness or stretching and all sorts of very traditional first principles physics measurements. But that's not how we as people experience the world. And so we've always towed what I consider a sort of a blurry line between art and science if you don't really understand it. But the human element puts that art in there. It puts an element of emotion and puts an element of subjectivity that is often difficult, if not impossible, to remove from our human perception of the world around us. And a good example of that is if I asked you to touch the fabric backing of the conference room chair next to you, for example, it might feel warm. If you grab the metal leg of the table underneath, it feels cold. we can go buy the most expensive thermometer in the world. The two are, exactly the same temperature, right? But they feel different to us. And that phenomena is quite simple in the thermal domain, but actually is existing in all the other different components and elements of touch. And so being able to orthogonally separate those allows is something unique to our system. We don't just push a button and get a number, or push a button and get an answer. The idea is that this is meant to be, again, going back to that microscope, something that allows you to take a deeper look, where you're still going to have to apply that knowledge, that learning, and figure out, hey, what is it about this haptics or haptics experience that I'm after, and what do I want to change, learn, etc.
Oh wow, so much to unpack there. That's such an awesome way to help people visualize what you're working on and the kind of like magic of it. I'd love to know, maybe as a first place, like what are some of the key challenges that you broached, like when you're like creating this kind of technology, and as like you're learning along the way, because it's such like an innovative and important space, as you mentioned. It's like this is something that deals with the interaction, these kind of like fundamental interactions that people have that are so critical.
Our biggest challenge is probably inertia, is overcoming the most dangerous sort of mentality that a lot of our clients have, which is, this is the way we've always done it. We're introducing something that is very greenfield, and we're introducing a new type of measurement method or methodology that may not have been in place in these organizations. So while some of our clients have, let's say, some other tribology equipment or some measurement devices, most of our clients don't have anything. What they have right now is fingers of the people that work at the company, and they do a human panel survey in the cafeteria, or perhaps a focus group, or maybe even a human sensory panel that is paid and focused. But the inertia is difficult because again, we work with a very large list of Fortune 100 companies. These are massive companies around for hundreds of years, making products that you and I touch and use every single day. And so to go in there and say, hey, no, you have no idea what you're doing, it's completely wrong, it's usually a non-starter, right? And so the goal is, hey, we need you to do something, and we need you to trust us, give us a little bit of rope. You're not going to adopt our technology and tomorrow, save millions of dollars, or, move the needle in a big way. It is an investment to adopt a new workflow, a new technology, bring it into your workflow, and learn how this data can give you insights where you don't have them right now. So we can help you do something better, faster, cheaper. If you're the largest diaper manufacturer in the world, you're moving probably $2 to $3 billion worth of diapers a quarter. So us saying, hey, you have no idea how to make a diaper, that's not really a starter. But us saying, hey, can we help you move the needle 1 or 2% a quarter? Well, that's a real number. That's real money. But that also takes an adoption, a learning curve of technology that is an investment, both on our side at SynTouch and on the client side, to say, we're going to dedicate some staff, a scientist, a lab. Maybe we adopt the equipment ourselves. Maybe we use SynTouch as a service provider. But that is our biggest hurdle, is that this isn't, push a button, get an answer. And it isn't a well understood technology in terms of how to integrate it into your workflow. And most of these big organizations that we work with have unique workflows, one to the next, whether that's an automotive company, consumer goods, or consumer electronics. Every single industry and each player within that industry is unique. And so it's us basically saying, hey, here's this new tool. It's really complicated and tricky to use at first, but the more you make, the more you put in, the more you get out. And that could be really powerful for you on the back end. So the sort of white space or future thinking or innovative research departments at some of these organizations tend to be our target audience. And it's really garnering the buy-in and convincing them that on the other side of this investment in the technology, not necessarily a financial investment, but an investment in learning and adopting a method, will benefit, make your lives better, faster, cheaper, or just give you the capability to do something you hadn't done before. And that's what's probably the most exciting and gets us out of bed in the morning at SynTouch, is that we describe ourselves, as a self-endearing term of nerds, and we love we get out of the bed in the morning not to sell instruments, not to, make a bunch of money. Sure, we're a business, but our goal really is to help the world solve problems related to haptics. So when the phone rings and someone says, "I've got this, crazy shampoo or this diaper or this phone screen or this anti-glass coating that doesn't feel right, or that I need to feel like something else or whatever," that's what's exciting for us, is really solving problems related to haptics. And the fact that we are a small, nimble company allows us to offer a different solution to each one of these clients by saying, "Hey, we're flexible, we're small, you're the big elephant that can't move fast." So what what the logistics of what we provide is different for each client, but our goal is always the same: is to help solve, these kind of interesting haptics problems that come up in the world.
I appreciate you sharing that story so much because I think all haptics companies will kind of face these similar type of walls of people who are just like, well, we've been doing it this way the whole time, or we've got like someone who's kind of focused on that, or yeah, maybe that's like a future down the road thing. So I think to hear from your perspective, especially now that you've got these huge types of customers who like you've really grown your business. I think just to hear that, that's where you started with, where like knocking down doors and people slamming them kind of in your face, like that's like the path that you took is definitely going to help some other companies who are facing that now, and giving them some good insights into how to persevere and to really hone in. I think what you've done is like really hone in your value, and really being cautious about your pitch, as you mentioned, like not saying like you don't know how to do your business. Those kind of things will definitely kill a meeting quite instantly. So that's fantastic. You've mentioned some of the use cases already, but I wanted to
Mhm.
dive a little bit deeper for folks who get like a more tangible, if you will, idea of some of them and like what it's actually like. So if you can talk about, there's like certain industries you cover, there's quite a few,
Mhm.
whichever ones you'd love to give examples for. We'd love to just like give folks an idea. You mentioned like diapers and shampoo. Like,
Yeah,
what does that actually look like? What does that kind of experience kind of start from and turn into?
sure. We have tested everything and anything under the sun when it comes to products. So everything from contact lenses to baseballs to automotive steering wheels, um, shampoos, metals, plastics, glass. If you think about the things that you as a human touch every day, from waking up and the linens in, that you're interacting with, the door handle, the fixtures in your bathroom, right? Everything is made by a company, whether you've thought about it or not. And this was something really interesting for me. But every product, whether it's the simple plate behind the light switch, all the way down to, again, a fixture in a bathroom, or something really complicated like the laptop or the electronic device that you use, was engineered by a team, was designed by a bunch of people who spent a lot of time, or a disgusting amount of time, thinking about how to architect and design and perfect that product. And one story there, I met a gentleman who worked in the papers industry for probably 50, 60 years. And he spent his whole career on embossing of paper products. So you're talking about the little pattern, whether it's the dots or the lines or the swirls or the Mickey Mouse face or whatever it was that was on that paper product. And I said, is there really that much to learn, in 60 years of embossing? Like, were you bored after the third week, right? And I didn't realize how insulting my comment was, but he was very kind to inform me that no, that there is this huge breadth and depth of manufacturing techniques and machinery, and the way whether you do it with water or heat or a different type of chemical, and you realize, wow, there is just so much that goes into every single product that you touch. And you think about these products so casually as something like a paper product or a facial tissue. You use it for what, inside of 5 seconds, and it's consumed. A diaper is literally something, right, that we defecate in and throw them away. It's like, it's incredible the engineering that goes into simple products, and then a millionfold when you think about something like tech or an automobile or an airplane, where it's like, wow, this is something that gets designed and pushed out once every 10 years, versus say a shorter design life cycle product like a cosmetic, or like a paper product that may be once or twice a year or seasonal. And when we get down to apparel, right, that's quite quick. So to a bit of a foundation to answer your question is that there is a ton of design decisions and considerations when putting forth a product. And haptics oftentimes is very far down the list of things that get considered when it comes to a product. And so when we do talk about haptics in the bigger scheme of the compromise of either the design or the quality control or whatever aches us, we don't have total freedom to say we want to make the haptics exactly like we want, because if we do that, we're over budget, or if we do that, we're moving to a different supplier, or the lead time went up, or whatever compromise it's going to be. And every product that we put forth, these clients put forth into the market, has a lot of different considerations. The interesting thing is that now haptics is becoming a larger and larger part of a lot of companies and a lot of products, because I think a lot of these industries have matured. A lot of the industries that we work in were born sort of, I don't want to say born, but were really innovating through the post-World War II era, 60s, 70s, and 80s, right? And if we think about tech, that probably lagged behind in sort of like 80s, 90s, and early aughts. But these are where monumental changes were being made year to year in some of these industries, right? If you think about a diaper from 30, 40 years ago, it was atrocious compared to one now. But the incremental changes that we're making now are where, the sort of interesting and opportunities for SynTouch exist. Same thing in technology. You think about a cell phone from 20 years ago compared to today, it's night and day. But year on year, the changes in consumer electronics have become smaller and smaller and smaller. And so, the functionality is there, the features are there. And now it's about, how do I differentiate my product from someone else in the market? Or how do I prevent, quite honestly, getting copied or getting ripped off? That happened a lot, has always happened, but it happened a lot slower in the past. Now, with the instant propagation of information, if a big brand releases a product, there's a knockoff of it available within weeks, whereas before it might have taken years. So these companies are up against a lot of challenges. Haptics continues to play a bigger and bigger role because they want to engineer and sensorialize as much of their product as possible, right? There's the visual effect, there's the auditory, there's the olfactory, and now that the sense of touch is coming more and more into play in the products that we consume in this world and that we use. And big brands, small brands as well, but mostly big brands are very conscious that if they want your business, if they want your market share, the total experience has to be engineered, and haptics plays a bigger role. That role, those challenges are, I would say, in three large pillars. It's really, what haptics experience do I want? So what type of haptic sensation do I want to deliver to my client? That's the first major pillar of challenges we kind of solve. The second is, how do I do it? So once I know my target, how do I get there? How do I get there efficiently? How do I get there consistently? How do I maintain that quality, right? But how do I pull off? So one, what's the target? Two, how do I get to the target, or how do I meet the target? And the third one, which is, I think, the most exciting, the most interesting for me, but also the one we've done the least with, because it's sort of lagging behind the other two, is how do we communicate it? So now that we've found this target, we've made this target, how do we communicate and propagate this information to our target audience and to our market, team members? And this was something that rapidly was accelerated during COVID in specifically the apparel industry. There are a lot of big brand apparel companies, performance apparel, that spend tons of time and engineering on what their products feel like, right? But COVID took away retail stores. And so when you had the ability to walk into a store and touch a garment on the rack and say, wow, I love the feel of this, I'm going to go try it on in the fitting room. And then that influenced your purchase decision. But had you not touched the clothes on the rack, you may not have tried it on, you may not have made the purchase. Well, now I don't have the ability to touch. I just have a picture of it on a website, right, or on an e-commerce platform. So how do I convey that information to my consumer, right? And it's really an interesting overlap between the engineering and design work we do in the lab for the haptics, and then the neurolinguistics problem we have of conveying this sensation, over a digital medium. And I use the analogy of cooking shows a lot, right? If you watch a cooking show, you can taste the food, you can smell the food, right? Especially if you're really enamored or interested in what's happening. You build this sensation, this connection with the olfactory, right? And so you're basically drooling looking at the television. How do we convey that information using either words, video, sounds, whatever it is, using the digital medium about haptics, about touch, right? Because I think that that's an interesting alternative to probably the wish that everybody wants, which is some sort of magic tactor that, hey, I'm touching this thing in front of me and I'm feeling something else or some sensation somewhere else. So the industries that I would say we work with the most and have become very large pillows for us are performance apparel, consumer products and goods, and consumer products and goods meaning like store-bought products that you use every day, consumer electronics, and cosmetics.
That's awesome. So much insight in that, Peter. I love that so much. You covered so many spaces, even just the thought, I think, for people of products of what they used to be and the forms that they used to come, and the experience you have today. That's a great way to understand kind of like the evolution of how we can utilize technology like this to create just like a much better user experience across the entire gambit. So, and I also like that you mentioned your story about embossing. I'll share, like, I've got like a business card that you can barely see, but I've got the embossing. So it's like, it does matter. That user experience really does matter, from the outside of a package to when you're opening on the inside. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it feel like to, turn a lipstick tube? Like every little element, across the board is considered, like how much it takes to squeeze a package. So I think that's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. On the lipstick, I mean, if I can just jump in, one of the interesting things, and as someone who is an observer and not necessarily a consumer of a lot of the cosmetics that we work on, it was interesting to me to see that as we sort of reach this asymptote or a law of diminishing returns in investing in the actual formulation of cosmetics sometimes, then the attention gets turned to, well, what does the container look like? How does the container feel? How does the paper box that the container comes in look and feel? And so again, your sensorial experience of pick it up off the shelf, well, you're not actually touching the cosmetic in the store, you're touching the box, and inside there may be let's say a tube of lipstick or a container of moisturizer, and then the product's inside that still. And so the feel, the sort of cohesive haptic experience that transcends across each of the different sort of interface points for you as a human becomes really interesting. And I was just like, oh yeah, that's again, the engineering into a cardboard box. It sounds silly, but then you realize that could be the differentiating factor between making the sale or not. So yeah, it's again fun to learn about all these different industries that, again, as someone who was planning on being basically a glorified switchboard designer and operator, to dive into why lipstick packaging is that way is fun.
That's awesome, because it reminds me of a story. So I purchased a phone a while back. It was a OnePlus phone, and I specifically remember the outside box being the surface, the certain kind of texture. It was like velvety smooth, and I literally like tore a piece of the box to keep, because I was like, at some point I will find a way to like figure out what this is and I will utilize it for something someday, just because it was such an amazing experience. It was literally the outside of the box, and I just like sat there, and I probably still have it somewhere, and one day, Peter, I will utilize it, and I probably have your company to thank for that.
Well, we should just measure it for you, so then you can memorialize it numerically forever.
Yeah. I appreciate that. That's fantastic. I think what would be great is, I have so many more questions, but I also am cognizant of the time. But I think for someone who's maybe from like a similar background as you, like, can you give some insights into just like challenges that you faced like professionally in this type of career, and the kind of like the things that you would share with someone who's maybe like new to haptics coming into the space?
Yeah. I think the first is you have to be comfortable talking about what it is that you do, and you have to practice explaining um, what you do to other people. I would probably describe myself as a representative or as a salesperson for my organization. I have no sales training or background in the sense of by schooling, right? But this is something that you fall into when you work on something that is very complicated and is not straightforward. A big part of your success is going to be how well and how clearly you can communicate what you do in an effective way. So um, you're going to be really bad at it at first. We all are, and you have to practice and you have to determine what works and what resonates with people. And depending on your audience, again, one of the things I'm very fortunate is sometimes I'm speaking to someone with multiple PhDs, and then other times I've got someone who's a business guy who's trying to figure out how to justify buying a widget that makes his business more money, and he doesn't care how it works or what the motors are like, or doesn't even want to spell haptics, right? It's just you have a wide range of audiences. So I think that when you work in any sort of greenfield technology space, you have to get comfortable, and it definitely can attest to the fact that most engineers, myself included, don't necessarily start in that position. So get comfortable talking, get comfortable explaining to people who are not of your same background, right? What you do and how you do it, and that's never going to go away, right? If you want to be a trailblazer, you're always going to have that awkward first mover conversation, as much as possible. The other point that I'd say that's difficult, I think, in any field, but specifically haptics and the world I came for before of custom robotics, is that I feel very blessed because I started in this type of field, but recently had a team member join, and over the past year we've really swapped a lot of anecdotes. And he came from a field of selling equipment that was very straightforward. People knew what it was. Let's just call it a camera. If you needed a camera that took this kind of picture, you grabbed, you Googled it, you grabbed the spec sheet, you called up the number on the back of the catalog. Hi, I need 6. Great. They shipped out the door. And if you were, doing outbound sales, hi, we know that you bought these cameras in the past. We have a new model. Here you go, out the door. And it was very, not easy, but did not have the challenge of needing to educate and convince your potential customer. And it's not convince in a way of sort of conning. It's explaining, right? You are broadcasting something new, and so you have to get used to being told no all the time. And I think that is something that, had I not, been born into it, is very difficult. And I've seen that in a lot of my team and greener talent across the industry, or perhaps folks that especially are being told yes all the time, or are very successful, and then enter into the world of haptics and realize that if you send an email blast of 10,000 emails and you get a 2 or 3% engagement rate, that's incredible. That's not terrible. That's incredible. The world that I'm in is extremely high cost, low volume sales. And so for me, it's okay. I'm used to being told no constantly, and that's fine. As long as it's a no for the right reason, an informed decision, right? So if I've done my job of educating the client and understanding, hey, this is what my technology is, this is how we can help you. If it doesn't work, it's a no for the right reason, then I love that. If it's a no for the wrong reason, well, that's an opportunity left on the table. And the inverse is true, right? If it's a yes for the right reason, then we're all winning. And if it's a yes for the wrong reason, then that's potentially damaging to everybody, right? So I think it's accepting that your job is going to be reach and frequency, education, and we like to say consulting to your mother, right? If your mother was on the other side of the phone, right, or a loved one, give them the advice, that you would want. In the short term, honestly, you'll probably make less money and have less success, but over the long term, you will establish yourself and establish your organization represented in such a way that doesn't move, and that it's hard. That's a challenge, right? It takes time, and it's tough to do, and it's frustrating, right? As I'm sure we can all relate. But to me, it's worth it. But it is an uphill battle.
Yeah, amen. You're definitely preaching there. Lots of no's and lots of reasons why it's no. So that's super helpful for folks who are just new to this space to really understand, yeah, the type of environment you'll be in. I think it resonates across different businesses, but at the same time, haptics is such a niche area where, as you mentioned earlier too, it's like it's kind of like a small industry, and it's an uphill battle of like trying to get people to learn that how important haptics are. Has that changed over time for when you've been in the business? Has it gotten easier? Do you see it getting easier? And what's going to help get us to a place where maybe more people understand the value of haptics? Like, what's it going to take, Peter? What's the answer?
I think it's changed. I remember the better part of, I don't know, 15 years ago, um, every time I said the word haptics, I then had to explain what the word haptics was. And everybody has a slightly different definition of haptics. And I think the nice thing is that, one, the term is becoming more and more used. I don't think that the definition is perfect. It's never going to be. But it seems that the world is starting to converge on some basic understanding of haptics. And I think that we can attribute that to what I would consider and what maybe people in the community would consider as very uninteresting applications. Digital buttons or a cell phone that vibrates on a touch screen when you start to click it. These are important. They're things that we use every day. The things we don't even think about anymore. But when they were first introduced, they were groundbreaking, right? The BlackBerry hung on for so long because of that clickety clackety keyboard, and then somebody figured out how to do it differently. And was it as good? No, but it's close enough. And then your brain's really good at stitching all that information together and saying, yeah, this is a keyboard, even though it's a glass sandwich. But as more and more people, I think, are exposed to it, and more companies adopt in very small ways, haptics and sort of haptic devices, whether that be on the measurement side or on the tactor side, on the playback side, people are getting these tiny amounts of exposure, and we're starting to build that little snowball at the top of the mountain. We all want the avalanche. We have no idea when it's coming, but the only way to do it is to really keep building the snowballs. I think it's exciting to see the change. I mean, again, I don't have to necessarily explain it every single time in such great detail. And I can use these analogies of mouse pads and phones now, whereas, 15 years ago, you really couldn't. You had to explain what a real force in a virtual space acting on a human was. And it's just like, sometimes people don't want to have that conversation. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I think I know we're making progress, but it's the adoption of the consumption is going to depend, I think, on the individual. And I don't know when the big disruptor is going to come. I don't know when to use an analogy, right, the iPhone of the haptics world will come, right, where it's different and unique and flagrant enough to basically grab everybody's attention. Doesn't mean the adoption, but at least the attention and the education of, okay, I know what that is. What you do with it's up to you, but sort of enough, flagrancy to sort of attract attention.
I'm kind of curious from your opinion on a lot of haptics companies provide an experience that gets put in the hands of someone else who's responsible for the outcome. So you're in a similar case where it's like you're responsible for kind of the technology, and then what they do with that information is up to them. Do you think that has an impact on the education of haptics, where like haptics companies maybe don't have as much say just because of the nature of like the business? Like, are there things that haptics companies can do to help educate people? Like, is there things that SynTouch is doing to help educate people on like the types of value that you provide publicly? Or do you rely more on just like them doing their cool stuff, and then because they do cool stuff, it kind of comes back to you? Chicken and the egg.
Yeah, definitely a chicken and the egg problem. A large number of the organizations that we work with do the coolest things with our technology. And if I could talk about it openly and liberally, I would be retired. SynTouch would be, a household name, and this conversation will be over. But unfortunately, that's not the case, right? The large advantage that we give to a lot of clients is competitive edge. How do I one up my competition, or how do I reverse engineer something else my competition has done? How do I innovate in the white space that no one else in my market segment is doing? And so if you then, sort of publish the recipe, well, then now you're instantly leapfrogged, right? Especially in a lot of big brands and consumer products, where again, our sales are B2B, but the business to consumer is where the technology is being implemented. Paranoia, it kills us. So we have, hundreds of thousands of case studies. I would say probably less than 10 are public and flashy enough for someone to say, oh, wow. So we don't have that luxury of saying, look at this and look at this and look at this. If we did, again, we'd be in a very different position. But what we are doing, and what we like to think about, is that we're selling a tool. And one of the things that we don't necessarily want to sell is the tool, right? So if you're selling a hammer, I don't want to talk about how this hammer's made with a heavier metal and it's more corrosion resistant and the handle's really comfortable. I want to say, look at the house that somebody built with my hammer, right? And then someone else will go buy the hammer, right? So you're selling a tool, but people don't buy the tool for the tool in and of itself. They buy it for what it can do. What can it help? So if I can go out there and say, hey, we moved to the market share on this industry, or we were able to innovate something that wasn't otherwise able to be done. We're not going to tell you how. We're not going to give you the blueprints for our house, but we're going to let you look at this beautiful house that was built with our hammer, and maybe some other, screwdrivers and tools that other folks made as well. But that's, to us, the only way that we can sort of propagate that. The other thing that we're hoping will come out of the critical mass once we're out of this chicken and egg conundrum is that once we reach a critical mass of buy-in, that we will be accepted as a standard. And so we have, we have the kilometer, we have the kilogram, we have the liter, we have these standard units of ways of measuring all sorts of different things. Can we standardize the way in which we measure, touch? And RGB became a very standard way of measuring color. But most people don't realize that came from the electron guns that used to paint old cathode ray tubes and televisions, right? Red, green, blue, or 0 to 256 came from the A to D output, right? So our system was designed for people. So it's a little 0 to 100, a little easier to mentally think about. But can that become a standard? And that will happen once we have enough critical mass. And I think that will be the stick of dynamite that triggers the avalanche for us, is that, hey, this is the standard way of doing it, right? If you need to drive in a nail, you buy a hammer. Could you do it in other ways? Yes. Could you get it done? Yes. Is the best way to do it a hammer? Yes. And so once we kind of become, certified is the wrong word, but accepted that this is the tool for the job, then I think our lives will become a lot easier. And this paranoia around how did you do it will go away, because we know you used a hammer. Let's not talk about that. What kind of house did you build, right? Because that's the exciting thing. How are you going to change the world? How are you going to move your industry? How are you going to push more product or develop something? How are you, back to our mission at SynTouch, how are you going to solve your subset of problems that are related to haptics in this world? And that's we're looking forward to on the other side of that.
I love that, because it's a mentality of kind of like you've got this server of KFC recipes of all these different products and like what they feel like. And it's, everyone's got their own kind of feel and what it should be like. And then kind of like the other side of that, like the bigger scope of that is it relies on like uniqueness and creativity, which is like something that like humans are uniquely great at. So I'm kind of curious, based on that, in some ways, kind of what you're working on seems like it's AI, or could utilize AI. Is that an area that your team is like working on, touching on, or something that you're utilizing in any kind of capacity you can talk about?
Yes. So I'm going to use an analogy here, but basically think about car interiors and what made a good car interior over the years, right? So if we go back to the 50s and 60s, if you had the tweed interior, you were like, the business. And then as we moved into sort of the 80s, right, it was this big push for heavy sort of natural materials. So we saw a lot of wood and real grain leather. And then as we moved into the 90s, chemical companies started developing synthetics. And so we had that 10-year era of like pleather. And this is what you were getting when you were buying, a premium. This was the preference. This was the desired thing. In the early 2000s, there was this big push for, can we make lightweight real materials? So can we put real metal and real stone and all these different types of products? And then now today, there's this big push of lightness, right? Sustainability. And can I make a synthetic leather that feels like real leather, but has UV protection and doesn't stain, et cetera, et cetera. So what is good and what is bad? What is, to use another analogy, what is people's favorite color is always changing, is always a moving target, right? But it doesn't change overnight. It's not one day it's blue, it's red, it's this, is that. Again, if you looked at each model year car, of a particular brand and said, this is, our premium product, our flagship product, as you progress through 30, 40 years, you would see a slow curve, a change, and occasionally maybe a big pulse or spike. But in essence, it's like a river, right? It flows. It doesn't always go the same direction. You don't know which way it's going to go next. But the step 1 to step 2, step 7 to step 8 is never this huge change, right? Because if this was everybody's favorite color last year, maybe next year it's not going to be too far away. It may have moved, but it's not in a completely different quadrant. And so for us, as we continue to start to gather this data about not only haptics, not only the perception of material, but haptics experience, the emotional response that people have. Do I like it? Do I not like it? Did I buy it? Did I not buy it? Right. So this human element, we start to get a very interesting opportunity to create algorithms, to create correlations, to create predictions of, okay, if this was the trend in automotive leather for the last 6 years, can we start to map out what it's going to be for the next 3? Or can we predict using AI if this is the leather that everybody's liked so far, and now we change this chemical, we can probably connect, hey, this is what it's going to feel like. And the next step is, are people going to like it? Are they going to buy it? And so we've done that now with a lot of the data and visualization platform tools that we've been building. And this is really an interesting sort of new thing for us at SynTouch, is that this is now a product that we're putting forth. So it's not just the numbers that come out of the instrument. That's interesting, but it's necessary but not sufficient. It's, here's a sandbox for you to play in. We want you to put all your data, not just from us, but from your human focus groups, from the other pieces of equipment you've got in your lab, from costs, from manufacturers, from the construction parameters, from the manufacturing techniques, everything. The more knobs, switches, and dials that you can put in there and that we can collect data points on, the more that we can leverage, AI or sort of machine learning to allow us to become predictive, right? And to really become to target sensations or haptics opportunities that otherwise would not have been discovered by trial and error. And a big one for us is, an analogy for us is drug discovery. So if you think about drug discovery, and this has been used in drug discovery for quite some time, you think about all the different molecular combinations. There's billions and billions and billions of combinations that may create a drug. How do we narrow that down? And so we use AI to narrow that down to maybe a selected candidates of, 50 or 100. From that 50 or 100, maybe 10 to 15 get actually synthesized. From those 10 to 15 that get synthesized, maybe 2 or 3 go to trials, right? And then maybe they get adjusted, tweaked, and go. But how do we get from boil the ocean to here's this 5-gallon bucket of water? Once we have it narrowed down, okay, that problem can be refined, and effort can be as much effort as you want can be concentrated on that small area that you've narrowed down. But sort of starting from this, well, we could make any sensation, we can make anything feel like anything. How do we pick? How do we choose? That's where we want to aim. Machine learning, AI scares me, using those words, but I like machine learning. So that's what we'll call it.
All right. Yeah. We'll marketing, AI, machine learning. Awesome. I appreciate you sharing that, Peter. That kind of leads into our last section, which is on future. My favorite section, gets me super excited. So this question is about your opinion on where you think the most promising area and applications are for haptics. It can be kind of like a broader sense.
I think that there's a huge opportunity and a very interesting um, frontier in the space of sort of human and device interaction. So, we're very commonly now seeing people wearing smartwatches or some sort of other type of wearable device, whether that's a headset or, health monitors, fitness, right? Different types of monitoring or sort of data gathering. But the community kind of part of it is interesting, right? When these devices start being able to potentially talk to one another or communicate with one another independently of the wearer, and then adding sort of technology, whether that's data acquisition or haptics feedback, to other elements of what we do. So smart clothing is something that I think is really interesting. I don't know that necessarily would be universally adopted at first, but in certain situations, things like first responders, or I often think of the Iron Man suit. I liked a lot of the videos in those movies where they would show the screenshot of the actor's face, and then they'd have this sort of overlaid HUD. And I think Apple maybe scratched the surface on that a couple of days ago with their what do they call it, their vision goggles or whatever it may be. But this sort of integrating better. And I don't think we're there yet. Apple still has this ridiculous looking thing that you're going to wear on your head that's akin to a helmet, right? But if you take it all the way towards the Iron Man, right? It looks like a face. He's got a computer in front of his face, and it's all working together as one. It's not him using a computer. It's not him wearing a computer. It's him and the computer, him and the device, the suit, acting as one sort of organism. And so I think that seamless integration of some of these devices, whether it's a wearable, whether it's a smart t-shirt or whatever it is going to happen. I don't necessarily know personally that I'm super excited about it, but I see it happening.
I love you being just like realistic. Like, I don't want, it's not for me. Like, good for you to have, not for me. Do you think this is like a 10-year out thing? Is this like a longer out thing, Peter, that you're talking about? This kind of vision of like the Iron Man smart wearables?
I think the level of seamless integration is quite a ways out. I think that we will continue to learn, right? Every time a big player puts out a product, so much is learned. I mean, think about when the first VR headsets came out. They were terrible, and you couldn't really do anything with them. And slowly but surely over the past 10 years, so much has changed, and they've found a niche. I don't think they're as universal as we once envisioned, or that we claimed in the original pitch deck, shall we say. But they've found their home. And I think that will continue to happen on a small scale, where different types of technology will find their home in niche places and sort of niche applications. But slowly but surely, it will grow to become ubiquitous. So I think it's 10 years, if not more, before we see truly seamless, effortless integration where you don't even think about it, you use it blindly. I think for a long time it's still going to be like, okay, I've got to go get the VR thing, or I got to go get the goggles, or I got to go get the smart boots and like put them on and do the thing with it, which is fine. But incrementally, slowly but surely, we're going to get to that point where it's just becomes invisible, right? And I think that some use cases and applications are going to have an easier path of adoption, right? There's a company out there that makes like a smart ring, and so if you're already wearing a wedding ring every day, you slide on a new smart ring, and now you're collecting data. What you're doing with the data, we don't know yet, but you're collecting, right? Same kind of idea, the early smartwatches, right? A lot of people who adopted smartwatches were people who were not wearing analog watches, but then the people who finally, sort of conceded and said, let me try it. I said, oh, wow. Okay. This is great. Or actually, no, I want to go back, or I'm just not a watch person. But there were a lot of people in different circles that weren't overlapping that I think all of a sudden had some overlap. And so I think it's going to be slow. I think it's going to be incremental. And I think I'm excited to see what happens when it isn't, go get the chunky, cumbersome thing and do the activity with it, but rather it's just, it's seamlessly integrated. And then, that's when the real interesting applications start to emerge.
There it is, folks. Peter's future. I think it's pretty hype. I love it. Love the idea of integrating into like more clothing, make it less cumbersome. And I think you mentioned something really important, which is like some of the technology today requires you to buy in without having that kind of understanding of what the outcome is really going to be. And you have to just kind of ride it until something amazing kind of turns into it. And that's, I guess, the nature of new technologies and, trying to stay on the cusp of what's happening and learning and kind of like just being a part of what's new and believing in some degree, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Right. But it's a interesting risk that not everybody's willing to take. Right. And so very few early adopters, right? That's why they called early adopters, right? Because you are the beta testers for this technology in not so many words, right? So you're helping whoever's making it or the community figure out what the heck to do with it. And then once they figure it out, everybody else will come on board.
Amen. Man, we need to take that quote from you and put it on a Haptics Club t-shirt. That was great.
It's Alice in Wonderland, so I can't take all the credit.
Yeah, yes, Alice in Wonderland, Peter.
Yes.
Cool. All right. So final question is for anyone listening who wants to learn more about you, what your company's doing, where should we direct them? Where should they go?
Yeah. So SynTouchInc.com, and that's our website. You can start there. We have a lot of sort of very high level content that explains what we do to a very vast, wide audience. It's not super technical. If you want to do that deep technical dive, there's a lot of research papers there hosted, but there's a library of so many more that we have behind the scenes. So don't hesitate to reach out to either me or SynTouch directly through our contact form and sort of ask how we can learn. There's a couple of recorded, I don't know what you'd call them, webinars, sales pitches, if you were, where you can see either myself or one of my colleagues explain our technology using some slides. So to be a little bit more tangible than what we did here, a little less conceptual, a little bit more, hey, this is the machine, here's how it's used, here's the technology, here's the method, here's how it's integrated. But our website, I'd say, is the best place. And then as we started this conversation, the haptics community is small and it's intimate. And so please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly, whether it's through SynTouch or LinkedIn. And as Ashley, I'm sure, can attest, everyone knows everyone here. So don't hesitate to sort of jump into the circle.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll add those links to all the descriptions, and your YouTube channel has some amazing videos that are just like great descriptors of like really cool, just like the use of your machine and the just the experience that people can expect. Love that so much. So we'll share those. Okay. But that's the end of the Haptics Club for today. Man, Peter, thank you so much for joining us. This was such a great conversation, and we hope to have you back. I'll definitely bug you in the future. But for anyone listening, be sure to check out thehapticsclub.com. Follow us on LinkedIn, on Twitter. Our blog is live. Here's articles from your favorite hapticians. And of course, we've got Haptics Club swag now. We're going to have to get that t-shirt with Peter's and Alice in Wonderland quote. We're attributing to both. Of course, you can catch the next episode. And this episode will be on YouTube. It'll be on Spotify. It'll be on Apple Podcast. All your favorite platforms to listen and watch. And thanks again to our Haptics Club sponsor, Haptics Industry Forum. Check them out at hapticsif.org. And we will see you all at the next episode, as Dr. Dre says.